Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of To The Point podcast. Everybody's doing well on this beautiful Tuesday, and me and Shamus are back. We were off last week as Shay played some golf, got some good rounds in, even though the weather didn't really cooperate with him. But we're back tonight to talk about the last two episodes of season 2 of Breaking Bad that we're gonna have a lot to talk about, as we were just talking about before we went to air here. It's an emotional ride, a lot of interesting decisions by our protagonists, and really leads us into an interesting season 3. But Shay, how was your week off, and how are you feeling now getting back on the grind?
Good. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to be back. Like I said, like you were saying, I had all last week off, so it was a little vacation. Fortunately I wanted to get this one in because obviously, like you said, there's a lot to talk about and there's a lot going on in these next two episodes. But yeah, because schedule got shifted around there, a couple golf matches, unfortunately, with my cousin Autumn and other things going on. So yes, I appreciate you, having some patience and letting me go another week. But no, I'm excited to get back on it. And the weekend, unfortunately, was shit due to the weather. Thank you, New Brunswick.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm not going to complain. I got to see friends and family, and that's all you can ask for. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, good weekend as well. Went up to the capital for a little fun, and obviously I did my interview yesterday with Zach Vucali, so that was a lot of fun. Really interesting chat with him. Really self-deprecating guy. We talked about some interesting things. So anybody listening, if you haven't heard that yet, that's on the podcast feed and also on Facebook if you want to see the video version. So yeah, it was cool chatting with him and talking about Memorial Cup, World Junior, and crazy career that he's had.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people comment on the repost I did when on Instagram, and a lot of people were catching traction and kind of seeing about him. Obviously, playing in Halifax was a big thing, and so people from down there were kind of saying, is this your podcast? And I was like, no, it's my good friends, but check it out, all the means. And no, I hope it was good. I hope you got some feedback from it too as well.
No, so far so good. So, and he was great too. He's really, really nice guy. For a guy I've never talked to, he's sure nice to me. But tonight we're talking about episodes 12 and 13 of the end of season 2. And just for a little refresher of everybody, when we ended, Walter was in an interesting spot. He had broken into Jesse's apartment and gotten all of the meth, almost 40 pounds of meth. And he was about to do a massive drug deal for $1.2 million with Gus. We know his name is Gustavo Fring, and he is the owner of the Los Pollos Hermanos, the chicken fast food chain. And while he's in Jesse's at the end of the last episode that we saw, he gets a text from Skylar and that the baby is on the way. And Walter's put in this position where he has to make a choice. He's got 1 hour to get there to get his money, drop off the drugs, or does he go to the birth of his second child? Really a miracle baby at, his first son's 16 years old. Skylar's 40, he's 50. So they're not spring chickens when it comes to having kids. But Shay, take us through what Walter decided to do.
Yeah, I think we both answered that. We kind of debated, and we both said that we take the cash because obviously it's setting this baby up for the rest of its life, but obviously there's consequences with that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And truly, that's what Walter does. He goes to this abandoned motel/location. You see him whip out his spare tire. It goes flying down the road. I don't think he goes back for that bad boy.
No.
And sure enough, he does the exchange, and he gets the cash. Just eyes beaming at this amount of money. I mean, he'd never seen so much money in his life. And yeah, that's it. And then sure after that, he's zooming to the hospital because that's where he's needed.
Right. So he goes to the hospital. The baby's already been born. It's been, Skylar says she barely made it to the hospital. But who's in the room but her boss, Ted, who we know they kind of have this sexual tension / history. So Walter walks in the room. He's kind of like, oh, hi, Ted. And it's kind of this weird moment where he's holding his baby, but Ted's just standing there also. And it's kind of a funny scene.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think Walter may have some suspicions, but I mean, it's never a good look when especially with Walter, you can think about how prideful he is, and how proud of him, husband and father he is, to have another man there helping, and basically being there for the birth of his own child. So
Mhm.
I think he's a little sour about that, but at the same time, he does say thank you, because I mean, God only knows if Skylar had to do this all on her own, right?
Yeah, if she was left at work or if she was the only one there, I mean, worst case scenario can happen
Eh,
there for where
Yeah,
both she could be hurt and also the baby. So he swallows his pride for once there. He's not very good at doing that, but hey, most men aren't. Um, just speaking from experience. Meanwhile, Jane gets a phone call from her dad, and if you can recall, her and Jesse just did a bunch of heroin, so they're really spaced out. She's getting a call. She's hearing a knock on her door, and she thinks it's Jesse's, but she quickly realizes it's on her door. So she scrambles out of Jesse's to her place, and she's gonna be going to her addiction meeting with her father, but 18 months sober, down the drain, first doing crystal, now doing heroin. And while she's kind of scrambling to get to the meeting with him, Jesse awakes to a broken window and no more meth.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of casual, right? She's just like,
Mm.
yeah, your place got broken into, and then she just walks out. That's what I found so funny about it.
Right.
And Jesse is kind of in a haze, obviously, from coming from his down, and then he just kind of clues in. He's like, oh my god, like, what's in my apartment that's worth like hundreds and thousands of dollars, and
Mhm.
certainly checks, and it's gone. It's all gone. And you can imagine the panic, thinking, I let this slip through my hands and someone broke in with me being there. So, what does he do? He immediately calls Walter, or the white residence.
Yeah. So, yeah. So at this point, Walter's brought the money home. He's hid it. And he's at home, and Skylar's home with the baby, and they're kind of having this first really good time. Like they're putting her in the crib, and they're both smiling, and life's kind of normal for them. They've been at odds for a while, but they have this new kid, and sometimes children can bring couples together. So he's sitting there and he says, I'll get the phone. And Jesse's like what the hell? Like, we're robbed. I've been calling your phone. He goes, I just had a baby. Like, I'm not answering the phone. And he says, well, we got robbed, dude. And Walter's like, you junkie, you don't remember me shaking you, asking you where it was? And Jesse's like, what are you talking about? And he goes, I got it. I did a huge deal yesterday. Like, I got the money. And Jesse says, how much? And Walter says 1.2 million, which just, rocks Jesse's world.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think he's astonished that Walter was able to pull it off, but at the same time, they have a cut, so they would get 1.2 million, but Saul Goodman, of course, their brand new lawyer, is generous enough to give 40%, so that's technically his take in this deal. But yeah, no, like you said, they're pumped, but Walter's not happy, and I mean, he's got a good reason to. Is it at this time that Jesse visits Walter at the school?
Yeah. So yeah, Jesse goes to the school because he can't hear from him or whatever, and because he only heard from him once, and he's like, well, what the hell? Like, where's my money? Kind of thing. And he goes, I'll give you your money when you're sober. And you can't blame Walter in this scenario, because I think he's actually being like a parent, because he's saying, if I give you this money, you're going to shoot it all into your arm and you'll be dead within a week. And
Yeah.
Jesse's kind of sympathetic to it. He goes, oh no, I'm clean. Walter says, okay, you're clean. Okay. Piss in the cup. And Jesse's like, what's this going to prove? Prove that you're sober to me. And he obviously, Jesse kind of puts the cup down because he knows he's full of it. And then Walter throws in a little crack to Jesse that sets him off.
Yeah, he mentions Jane as, his junkie girlfriend. And, we've known how close that Jesse and Jane have gotten, I'd say, over the last, 3, 4 episodes.
Hmm.
And, Jesse loses it. He just kind of chucks the glass at Walter, trying to hit him intentionally,
Yeah.
misses, and it shatters. And you could see the resentment from both sides here, Juggy. I mean, Walter even says, you're the reason I missed the birth of my daughter. Because obviously, if Jesse was able to get the delivery, then Walter could
Hmm.
attend his daughter, Holly, I guess. So I guess we haven't even mentioned her name. That's her official name, and Holly's birth. But Jesse's just incoherent. He couldn't do it. We saw it. He tried to shake him, just not moving. Couldn't get it together at all. And in Jesse's perspective, he feels like he's done the work. He's earned the money. They're
Hmm.
from the beginning. They were a partnership, but I agree with what you're saying. Walter is looking out for his best interests because, after experiencing it firsthand and seeing Jesse in that state, he knows he'll be dead, in no time if he gets that kind of cash on him.
Yeah, it would do more harm than good for him to have that much money. And so they separate at this point, and it's kind of, bad feelings towards both of them. Walter's kind of shocked that Jesse kind of did that, kind of stood up for himself in front of Walter. We go back to the White House, and this is an interesting uh, little thing. Flynn, aka Walter Jr., is creates basically a GoFundMe page for Walter. And what it is, it's going to pay for his big surgery that's coming up in a couple weeks. And Walter hates this because it's basically, to him, it's charity. And when Flynn creates it, he doesn't really give him a thank you. He doesn't look excited whatsoever. And his demeanor toward the whole thing is just like, I don't accept handouts. I'm too good for that. And Skylar and Flynn are pretty put off by Walter's demeanor here.
Yeah, he even goes as far as asking Flynn to take it down, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Skylar kind of pulls him aside and says, "Hey, like your son worked really hard on this. Like, he thought you'd have a totally different reaction. I don't know why you're acting like this." But it goes right back to the first season when Walter wouldn't let Gretchen and Elliot pay for the treatment. It goes all the way back to, saying no to Hank and helping out. That's just Walter. He won't take handouts. And, this for him, having his face and name and, all his information online just for anyone to see and anyone to kind of help him out, yeah, just bothers the hell out of him. But he does keep it up, and Walter kind of makes a little appearance to our good friend Saul and kind of finds a resolution for his laundering problems.
Right. So they made 1.2 million. They kind of just, he said, described it. He kind of has 400,000. That's what they're going to have each from this deal because of after Saul's cut. So Saul says, well, okay, how are you going to launder money? $400,000. That doesn't just get laundered easy. So he says, well, what about your GoFundMe? It can be real people, Canada, Wyoming, whatever. People just looking out for good old Walter White. You put your money into these random people, and no one's the wiser. The FBI, the IRS isn't going to go look into this because it's just somebody donating to you, and it's a fake alias, but it's a good way to get money into your account.
Yeah, it's basically a hacker is what it is, right, Juggy? He said it's just
Mm-hmm.
someone from another country being able to hack into all over North America and basically just makes it look like the money's being sent from their computers, which you're right. Like, the IRS isn't going to go searching for all this. I mean, maybe not like they're not sending large chunks of money at one time. It's not like they're sending, $30,000 at a time, but like more like $20, $30 here, $100 there. And, that'd be hard to trace, honestly, if you were the IRS and trying to do something. So it kind of works out, but at the same time, Walter's voice is frustration. He's like, I've earned this money. This was all me. I was the one who made this. And my family, like I can't share it with anybody. I can't share it with my family. I can't share it with my friends. Like nothing. Like so for him, it's frustrating because he wants the credit that he thinks he deserves for doing all of this.
Yeah, that it's clearly just this, him not having, being an alpha male or being, successful in life. He's finally hit his peak, so to speak, his top notch in life when it comes to financial earnings, which to some people is, the be all end all. And now that he's out of financial purgatory, he's like, okay, I want to go buy the Bentley, in this harebrained idea, but I want to go buy a Bentley. I want to be the Jeff Bezos in this scenario. I want people to know, like, I'm making bank, like I'm the best in this field. And he can't even share it with Skylar because it's a tough sell to tell your wife, yeah, we're rich, I sell crystal meth.
Yeah, exactly. And it's tough in every form for him, but at the same time, you got to put your ego aside, especially when you think about the legal consequences. I mean, it's just frustrating. And Saul basically puts it into the right matter. He's like, you just got to take a step back and let fate do its work here, because clearly something's lined up with you having all this cash and you having a very subtle way of getting it into your life.
Right. So at this point, Jesse and Jane, go figure, do some more heroin. And they're kind of hanging out together, and after doing it, Jane's father calls again, and she's late to another meeting. And so she's scrambling. She goes, oh, I'm sorry, I slept through my alarm. It's the second time in like 2 weeks. That definitely be alarming for a former junkie. And as she's walking out of Jesse's apartment, who's there parked on the street but her father? Donald. Yeah. Poor Donald. And before she even can start saying, no, it's not what it looks like, he barges into Jesse's apartment, looks over the place, walks into Jesse's room, and sees the needles all over the table.
Yeah. And as I'm not a father, you're not a father, at least we hope we're not. But Donald's, he's angry, he's pissed.
Yeah.
And he's going to take it out on Jesse because he doesn't want to admit that maybe it's his sweet little girl's fault, but it's this junkie guy that she's been hanging out with. It's him that's caused all of this. So he goes after him, starts whacking him, starts beating him. And Jesse's no punk, so he grabs the bat and basically says, you want some, man? You want some? And yeah, Jesse's not that intimidating if everyone's ever seen Aaron Paul, but the father's like, you know what, I've had enough. This is the line. If you won't learn through rehab and rehabilitation through these meetings, you're just gonna get cold love. And he starts dialing 911.
Yeah, he says, I'm calling the cops, they're coming here. And she goes, no, like, don't do it. Like, I love him. Like, I can get through this. And she goes, we talk about going to rehab all the time. And he goes, I don't give a shit what this little junkie does. And Jesse goes, fuck off, bitch. And, but she says, Daddy, I'll go. He's like, where? I'll go to rehab tomorrow. He goes, no, today. She goes, no, I need to go tomorrow. I need to book off work. I need to, get stuff ready. Somebody to feed, water my plants, because last time you let them die. And which was kind of a funny
garbage. Yeah, garbage.
Who gives a crap about plants? But he goes, you promise? And she goes, yeah. And he tells the 911 operator, I've made a big mistake, hangs up the call. And for the time being, Jane and Jesse are still in the clear from Donald.
Yeah. So Donald's got a date. He says, tomorrow morning, I'm meeting you on the step. I'm taking you to rehab. No Jesse in sight. And basically, as the door slams, Jane looks at Jesse and says, we're going to get our, what's coming to us, what's coming to you, get that $480,000. And, we're going to start a new life. And Jesse, kind of being the pushover at this point, is like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's a good idea. We can do it. So what do they do? They have the balls to call Walter at home, and Flynn, they get no, Skylar answers the phone, and she says, "Oh, it's a former student. She's looking for a letter recommendation." So he goes, "Oh, okay." So he answers the phone, and it's not Jesse, but it's Jane on the phone, and she goes, "Hello, Walter." Yeah, and she goes, "You owe Jesse some money," and he goes, "Yeah, I'll get. Jesse's gonna get every penny when he's clean, not with you." And she goes, "Actually, you're going to give it to us tonight, or I'm going to call back and I'll tell your wife what you've been doing to make all that money. And maybe I'll call your DAA brother-in-law as well." So essentially they are blackmailing Walter into giving him Jesse's $480,000 cut of the 1.2 million.
Yeah. And it's, the fact that Jesse, trusted her, and, it's kind of stabbed Walter in the back now is an indirectly, shot from Jesse stabbing him in the back, because the less people that know about their dirty little secrets is obviously for the best. But I mean, they're clearly using it as, well, like you said, blackmail to get it at him. And she's sassy too. Like there's a sweet side to her that we've seen, kind of when it's her, Jesse, but there's also a sassy side to her, which comes out a lot, like as you've seen with this very scene. I mean, she's given Walter is, basically testing every bit of patience that he has.
She's verbally bitch slapping him and kicking him in the pills, basically saying like, don't test me because I'll crush you. Like, and Jesse's so uncomfortable with it because when she's on the phone, he's in the background, he's kind of got his hands together, and he's and then they go outside for a smoke, and he says, "I'm not the kind of person who rats or who rolls, sorry, and he's my partner." And Jane responds with, "No, you're my partner." And she's essentially replacing Walter, whether Jesse is okay with it or not.
Yeah, Jesse's at this point kind of blinded by love, in the sense that, he's not really maybe think about what's best, but what's at the time, what's kind of best for them. And, he's just basically going along with what Jane says, because I mean, he wants to keep her happy. He loves her.
Yeah, he's got a big heart, and he's got to make her happy, like you said. So at this point, Walter's kind of sitting on the couch, and but he has no choice. He's got to. He tells Skylar that they're out of diapers. He'll go get them. So he drives over to Jesse's with the big bag of money, and who answers the door but Jane? She grabs for the bag and says, "No, get away from me, Jesse." So Jesse comes, grabs the bag, and he says, which is ironic coming from Walter, but he says, way to go for wearing the pants in this relationship." And kind of hands it over to Jesse.
Yeah, it's a shot. And I mean, he's trying to clearly make Jesse feel bad, because I think he knows that Jesse is making the wrong move, and Jesse even knows a little deep down that he's making the wrong move. And he's basically saying, you got to reconsider this. Like this is not what you want. But Jane's not really having it. She's there, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, thanks for the money. See you later," and kind of just slams it right in Walter's face.
Yeah, and before he does that, he even says, "How do I know you're not gonna blackmail me anyway?" And Jesse pipes in with, "Don't worry, like you'll never hear from either of us again." And Jane kind of says, kind of like, "You hope," or something like that. Like she's still, you said that sassy tone. She's not letting him leave with like assurance. She's like, you just gotta hope we don't say anything, because again, she slams the door, but she leaves Walter with like another kick in the pills, saying, "Well, they're not really out of my hair yet, potentially."
Yeah, exactly. Could be just another loose end that, potentially Walter has to tie up.
So Walter leaves, and the two of them kind of looking at the money, and they're like, "Oh my God, like $480,000. Like, this is crazy." And they're like, "Where do we want to go? Start a new life?" And Jesse's like, "What about New Zealand? That's where they shot Lord of the Rings." And he goes, She goes, yeah, let's go to New Zealand. Because yeah, you can you can do your drawing and I can I forget what he does. He
Something,
farm
yeah,
something
like
stupid.
something really, really unlike Jesse.
Yeah. And she goes, yeah, yeah. But first, we got to get clean. We got to get clean, not for them, but for us. Like we got to go to rehab, so we're not spending all this money on needles, which seems positive at the time. However, at the end of the sentiment, she goes, "But we should finish what we have." And that's always shit. It doesn't matter what movie. I think in life, if you're an addict, you say that, but then you still turn to your addiction because you can say, "Yeah, we'll start tomorrow," but tonight you couldn't even sacrifice it enough to start. That night.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, what do? They go into Jesse's room and do the rest of their heroin.
Yeah, it's at this time that we get a great scene, and it's kind of a mix of crosshairs that, I love when stuff like this happens. Walter, obviously feeling in a mood, goes to the bar. He goes to a bar, sits down, and orders a beer. And what's funny is he gets a call from Skylar, and he's like, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. Like, this is my third store, and yeah, do you want me to get the ones that are not infant?
Yeah.
And Skylar obviously says no, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just be a little bit longer. I'll try Walmart next.
Yeah.
And he hangs up the phone, and who's sitting next to him looking at him but Donald?
Yeah.
And Jane's father. Donald's kind of look at him like, and Walter's got a moment of guilt where he's like, yeah, like probably doesn't, not the greatest move sitting at there having a beer when you're supposed to be out for your newborn baby. But Donald's kind of sympathetic, and because he's going through something in his own mind right now.
Right. So they kind of sit there and he says, do you have any advice? Like, I just had a daughter. Do you have any advice for me? He goes, not really. Just love them. Just love them and try to help them, basically. But they're going to make their own decisions and you really can't control them. If you want to help them, sometimes wanting to help them does worse than just leaving it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's an emotional conversation, like the topic, but the way it's done is not like, I think Donald, of course, thinks, yeah, my daughter's going through this again, but we'll get through it, kind of thing. And yeah, this is going to have to be something I have to deal with the rest of my life, that my daughter is a junkie and she's always going to be on that fringe of, being addicted and, rehab and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, Walter goes as far as saying, I have this nephew, which is referring to Jesse. He's like, I have this nephew and you just want to tell them what to do, but, he can't. And, eventually Donald says, well, you know what, you just can never give up because, without family, what do we got? Which ultimately I believe is true. So, Walter thinks about it as he's sitting there having his beer, and yeah, he goes back and he tries to talk some sense into Jesse, but results a little different than we thought.
Yeah, this is this end of this episode I think is one of the more powerful, emotional scenes in the history of television, maybe cinema. This is a crazy scene, what transpires. But
Before we get to this, Juggy, I got to say something. Ultimate. This episode's the ultimate foreshadowing.
Yes.
And I would say this before we get to the scene because obviously we'll see why. Even when we talked about the baby scene between when Skylar and Walter, and they put the baby on its side so that if it throws up, well, it's going to throw up on the side. They put the towel on the side. One of the scenes where Jesse and Jane are shooting up, Jane ultimately puts Jesse on his side because obviously he's, I think when you're on H, you're not really moving a whole lot. And, it's like when you're drunk, well, you ultimately have the chance of throwing up in your own mouth and, doing that. And this basically comes down to this final scene, but watching it for a second time just does a great job of foreshadowing everything that goes on and basically builds it up to the very last moment.
No, great point. We even see Jane like put a pillow behind Jesse at one when he shoots up for the first time because he's not used to it either. So she's more of a seasoned pro. But so Walter goes back to Jesse's and the front door's locked. So he goes to his normal break-in spot. They put a little piece of cardboard there, but he knocks it opens the door, kind of goes and starts shaking Jesse like he did, like Jesse, come on, like you, come on, like you're better than this kind of thing. Like let's just enough of this heroin. Like we can, I don't want us to be fighting kind of thing. But Jesse's just like a zombie. But as he's shaking Jesse, it throws the bed kind of shifts and Jane falls on her back. And while he's still talking to Jesse, she begins to choke. She starts choking on her own vomit. And Walter is standing there. He can go save her. He can continue her life. But he stands there motionless and lets her choke on her own vomit. And eventually she dies.
Mm-hmm. He even takes a second, and it looks like he is going to save her, and he stops himself.
Mm-hmm.
And through his perspective, he's thinking, oh, I have to save Jesse by letting Jane die. Yeah. That's honestly and truly the only thing you can think of at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And you have seconds to think about it.
Yeah, but it's a split-second decision.
Clearly, he makes that decision, and he indirectly kills her. That's, she's the one who put the needle in her arm. She's the one who decided to get back on it. But you're standing right there. You have the chance to save her, and you don't. To me, that's killing somebody. Maybe you have a different perspective.
No, I 100% agree. I think sometimes you can be an accessory. He's an accessory to murder because he did not save somebody or, be a good Samaritan. When you see somebody being robbed, you call 911. You can go to jail. That's a Seinfeld episode, the last one. They get arrested for being bad Samaritans. But this scene, I remember watching it for the first time, and I couldn't believe what the writers decided to do. Mm-hmm. And this is pretty graphic. When we see her face is covered with vomit, she's laying there. It's a really interesting way they decided to kill Jane. I think it was obviously, it's not great, somebody dying in a show, but it's oddly noble and then oddly Walter. That he decided to do what's best for Jesse, but what's best for him as well.
Well, you got to think that, Jane is now accessory to every information and every small deed that they've done.
Yeah.
She's the one who said it. I know everything about you. I know it all. Mm-hmm. And, Walter, he's got to think in the back of his mind, well, if I can get rid of this person, that's one less person that knows about my history, and one less person that can blackmail me moving forward. So he kind of does it. You're right. He does it for Jesse, but at the same time, he's a little bit doing it for himself in a way.
Yeah. And just as context, Bryan Cranston talks about this scene a number of times, but I listened to an interview and he said it took him probably 20 takes to do this because he started to cry every time because he saw his daughter laying there. That's what his mind went to. And he said he would start bawling just seeing Kristen Ritter sitting there, but he pictured his daughter not going to save her. And he said it was so hard for him to get through it because it was just a really emotional scene for him, watching somebody, obviously it's acting, but in his mind it was, his daughter dying right in front of him.
Yeah, you can literally see that reaction coming out of him. That's why it feels more, I think, genuine. I think mm-hmm. his reaction to it. But yeah, that's to do that take would take, I think, anyone more than one time, because it's obviously kind of overwhelming when you think about it. Someone doing that and dying right in front of you, and you're kind of helpless to save them.
Yeah, that obviously ends the character of Jane, played by Kristen Ritter. I mean, she's gone on to do some pretty good things in her career. But we'll see what happens with Jesse with the fallout of this. But moving on to the finale, that was the end of the episode, which is just crazy. Seeing him stand there, and the last episode starts in black and white, like many of season 2 have. With we see Walter's pool again. We hear police sirens. The people in hazmat suits. We see body bags near Walter's Chevy Aztec. And everything's kind of going the same way. They're moving evidence bags. We see books. However, at the end of the scene, there's a difference. We get to color finally. And we see a bunch of black smoke in the sky and 4 or 5 helicopters and police line Walter Street, but we don't know exactly why yet.
Yeah, it almost looks like a war zone, to be honest, right?
Mhm.
Like you got all these hazmat workers walking around, these vans moving stuff, and of course we still have the 2 bodies that are unknown in the driveway. But yeah, no, just chaos. And you're right, this is the first time, and I think this is the first time throughout the season that we actually get sound. Like
Yes.
before, we didn't have much sound, and now we actually get real sound as it kind of switches to color as well. So knowing that it's probably the last time they'll do this, they kind of give you the full shot of what's going on, with still a lot of mystery, of course, because they don't want to give away everything right at the beginning of the episode. One thing before I was going to mention, before we go on to this last episode, I just thought about it. The last 2 episodes before this one, they both end with Walter at Jesse's house, basically forcing himself to make a tough decision.
Right.
And I just thought about that. That's like kind of a recurring theme for just the end of the season, but that's kind of like a recurring thing for just those couple episodes.
Yeah, no, I never thought about that either. Yeah, obviously, going to drug deal, going to the birth of his daughter, or saving Jane or letting her pass away. And you could make the argument that he made the wrong decision
both times. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's Walter for you. We pivot after the opening scene. We get to the Breaking Bad theme song, and this is another tough scene. Jesse is on top of Jane giving her CPR, and it's so clear that she's deceased. She's paler than, it's a dead body pale, and he continues to give her CPR. He's crying uncontrollably on top of her. And after a period of time, he finally stops with the realization that she's dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very, very tough scene. Very well done by Aaron Paul, who plays Jesse, as he really, really captures like what it's like to wake up to somebody that you love and, ultimately they're gone. And, he just, breaks down uncontrollably. And, the first thing I thought of, well, who's the first person he's going to call but Walter, because, Walter will be able to kind of guide him and put everything to perspective. Walter's waiting at his home. He's got Holly in his arms, and, clearly he's thought about this conversation because he knows Jane's dead, and he knows it's a conversation he's going to have with Jesse. So.
Right. Yeah. He's got his cell on hand, which he rarely does because Skylar checks for the second phone, but he's got it with him. And he just calm down, breathe. And so Walter says, I'll take care of it. Stay where you are. Don't call anybody else. Don't leave the house. And Walter, better call Saul. He gives Saul Goodman a call, and Saul sends over one of his employees to go help Jesse through this situation.
Yeah, a seasoned veteran in every right. We'll remain him nameless now because we don't know his name, but introduced through the show, and he's a recurring character throughout the rest of the show, basically. And yeah, he kind of comes over. Jesse's outside, won't go inside. He's like, come on inside, and he basically says, you can see him kind of analyzing everything as he makes his way through the apartment. Where is she? She's out back. Okay, goes out there. And what he's doing basically is, taking away all liability that Jesse could get in trouble. So he's taking all the drugs, he's taking the belt that they used to shoot up with, the cash, the $480,000 that Jesse and Jane got the night before, and just kind of getting things straight with Jesse as he as he needs to basically acquit him of all liability of a drug issue here.
Right. So yeah, he puts it all in an evidence bag. And he asks him, "Do you have anything else in the house? Any drugs? You got any weapons?" No. He takes his marijuana pipe with him, or his bong, and but he goes. Jesse's still on the floor, basically looking at his hands, and he goes, "When the police call you, when the police come here, what are you gonna tell them?" And he goes, and he slaps him, and he says, "You say, I woke up. I woke up. She was dead. That's all I know." And he makes him repeat this 4 to 5 different times until he's saying it convincingly, and it doesn't sound like it was rehearsed. And this veteran basically says, "That's all you say. You don't say anything else to anybody. I don't think they're going to make you go downtown, because often in drug cases they don't, because it's just an overdose. But if they do, you don't know anything. You definitely did not call Saul Goodman. And, if there is a problem, you can call him as your attorney, but don't, reference him in any way."
Yeah. So the seasoned veteran in this, right? And it's an introduction to kind of him, but it also gives his character that settling, background knowledge of all of these things, and kind of this is what this guy does for a living. What's a good way to put it? He's
a cleaner.
A little bit, yeah. He's a cleaner in every sense. Like he's gonna fix your problems, and this is right now for Walter and Saul. This is what he needs to do, is get Jesse fixed up.
Right. Yeah. He goes there. He leaves, and then Jesse, a couple minutes later, calls 911. We pivot to the medical crew coming in. They're doing their work, and as Donald pulls up to the house to pick up Jane to go to rehab, he sees the paramedics, and he walks into Jesse's home, walks to his bedroom, where he sees them zippering up Jane's body.
Yeah, the toughest thing, of course, probably any father or mother would have to see, parent, I guess, would be to see something like that, and of course, the paramedics, they don't know the relations yet between them, but he just says, "You probably don't want to be here for this, sir." And they're kind of just moving her limpless body from the bed to the cart. And Jesse's kind of in the living room giving I forget her EMI or something like that information to this woman, basically saying, what happened to her, what's going on. And Donald walks in, kind of answers some of the questions that she needs to.
Yeah, Jesse didn't know her middle name or her birthday,
but he loved her.
Yeah, but he loved her. And so, yeah, they kind of ask if Jesse's gonna go to the hospital. He says no. So Donald just leaves.
Are you surprised there's no confrontation here between the two?
A little bit, but maybe he's in shock.
You think Donald is? Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps. Like, it's probably just such a pain, but yeah, I am a little bit surprised, but I think he saw the general remorse on Jesse's face, and maybe he didn't just, maybe he thought maybe he did love her.
Yeah, who knows? I just remember watching this the first time as well, and I just kept thinking to myself, like, as a father, how would you not react? But that's a great point, to be in shock and, maybe not to process what just happened is another way. In another breath, maybe Donald prepared for this. Maybe he prepared for this, since he started using, because it's easier to do that than to, for it to actually happen and not have mentally, thought about it before.
Right. I agree with that. So pivoting, we see that Flynn is still hard at work at the old PayPal, and Walter's money's starting to pour in. We hear just ding, 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 and the volume's up real high. And Walter's like, "Can you turn the volume down? It's hurting the baby." And Flynn's like, "Yeah, but look at all this money, Wyoming, Nebraska, all this." And so so they're going through that, and after another scene, we pivot to another scene where Skylar tells Walter that they're gonna do a story on Flynn and the money he's raising. Marie had some connections, and that the paper is going to be doing a story on Walter Jr.
Yeah, and much like the SaveWalterWhite.com reaction, he's not happy. He's not happy about this. He doesn't like the attention. He doesn't like that people are learning about, basically him getting handouts. It's bad enough that his own family knows about it. Now he feels like all of Albuquerque might know about it.
Right.
So he's a little ticked off, but at the same time, he kind of bites his tongue, and he basically just says, well, whatever. It's just a stupid article in the news. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So he thinks it's just going to be, and we think for a while it's just going to be in the paper, just like a headline about Flint. But Walter gets home one day and he sees a news crew outside, and they've decided to do a live hit at the White Home, basically interview Flynn sitting down with his parents. And Walter is just beside himself. He can't deal with it. He's pretty ticked off at this point. And, Flynn's talking about how his dad's his hero and that he's a good man, and, he never does anything wrong. And it's kind of just an ironic, funny scene where Walter's just sitting there like, yeah. Like, I'm all these things.
He's not even smiling either. Like, he's on live TV, but he doesn't give any effort into looking like he's happy. He just kind of sits there and takes it. And, he's thinking, I bet he's thinking, like, am I a good man? Like, the entire time you got to think, Walter is just done so many bad things at this point, and yet he kind of lives over this cloud of lies from his family, who, now are like, oh, he's a decent man. He's always willing to help. He's just hardworking. And Walter, he's just sitting there kind of like, am I? It's a little bit of self-reflection, I feel like, coming from his part.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's like, am I really a good person? Like, I've done all these things so far. I'm lying to my family for a long period of time, but he just kind of has to sit there and take it. So we'll get to Jesse and what he goes through in a minute. But at this time, Hank's finally back. It's been a couple episodes and we've seen Hank, but we see him back at the DEA, and he's talking about Combo, which was obviously the employee of Jesse and Walter, who was shot on enemy turf. So he's saying, well, there's no blue meth on the street since Combo's death. But the funny thing is, there is blue meth in Nevada, in Texas, in Wyoming. And he goes, there's something strange here. It's not the guy that we got in jail. I know that for sure. But, just for us as a viewer, Shay, it's kind of like, okay, they're figuring it out. There's, it's Gus selling away from Albuquerque. He's selling to these other different places, and it kind of shows us just how big of an operation that this, Gustavo Fring must have.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not in as we can see from the map, it's all around the state of New Mexico. It's not in the actual state itself. So it leads Hank to believe that, this guy's gotten smarter. He's become more regional, and he started selling outside the state because, obviously it's less likely to get caught. But yeah, not for a second Hank believed that the guy that they put away with Badger thought that was their man. And, clearly he's not buying it, and he's going to track this guy down. Right.
So after giving this PSA to the DEA crew, basically saying, we're going to keep looking for the blue meth. Like, he's hooked on it. His boss comes to him and says, Hank, can you come say hello to some sponsors? Like, they're sponsoring the DEA fun run this year. Sure. So he meets a couple, like a congressman and an attorney. And who's the third guy but Gustavo Fring, the owner of Los Polos Hermanos, of course, the hidden meth dealer. And he's, real nice guy. And he goes, no, I'd love to get back to the DEA. You guys are great people. And it's pretty smart on his account to blend in and really just be a good man in the community. But the funnier thing is he sees Hank has this jar out for Walter, and it's his face on it basically to donate money to his surgery. And Gus says, well, who's this? And Hank says, oh, that's my brother-in-law, Walter. Yeah, he's got cancer, big surgery coming up. And Gus goes, oh, that's a shame. Well, I want to donate for sure. So he throws in $100 bill, and it's really the first time that he's learned that that Walter has a brother in the DEA, and also that he has cancer.
Yeah, two huge pieces of information for Gus to get. It's kind of him flexing his muscles a little bit in the sense that he's got reach. He's in with the DEA and he knows things. That way he's kind of one step ahead. If you ever watched the movie The Departed, well, the whole background around that is basically having a man in each side between the Irish mafia and the police force, and that way Matt Damon's character in that movie kind of keeps the mob one step ahead at every move. And that's kind of what's going on here. I feel like Gus is getting himself, drilling himself into this. That way he knows all the activity going on, and he can kind of be one step ahead of them as well. But you're right, the two pieces of information are huge. One, Walter's got a brother in the DEA, step brother-in-law in the DEA, and two, he's also got cancer, which kind of gives him the motivation on why Walter would do this in the first place.
Right. Yeah. A school teacher doing this is way out of character. I mean,
yeah,
Gus is selling chicken, but at the same, we learn his backstory and why it's a little bit more, why he's a little more on point to do this. But so at this point, Walter's kind of just sitting at home, and he gets a call from Saul, and basically it informs him that Jesse's at this disgusting drug house, and it's full of just junkies, and it's gross, and it can be a really dangerous place. And basically, Walter goes with this still unnamed character that went and cleaned up Jesse's heroin mess to this crack house, and he got Jesse the hell out of there.
Yeah. And before going in there, the veteran basically tells Walters, like, this place has been known to be watched quite a bit. Like you serve a great risk going in here to get Jesse out. And it just kind of shows like Walter does care about Jesse in the sense that he wants him to get cleaned up, and he's willing him to get out of here. Going back even to the episode, Juggy, where we see that is his name Smooch?
Yeah.
Smooch and that skank, we'll call her.
Yeah.
What she likes to call her. And it's the same thing. Like either they find these houses and they just keep them like that, and they just throw the actors in there, or the crew that makes these houses is just so on point and so well done that that just makes you feel gross looking at it. Makes you shiver in your own skin looking at it, actually.
Oh yeah, like when you're watching it, there's only furniture in there are mattresses, and they're all stained and disgusting, and
like Walter's stepping over people, and like they're all shivering, and
he meets a guy at the door, and the guy at the door is a scary individual. He looks like he'd shank you for $20. And he finally finds Jesse. Jesse's kind of not awake, but Walter's shaking him like, let's go, we gotta get the hell out of here. And as he's about to pick him up, Jesse just starts crying uncontrollably. And he's like he's his father in this moment. He's got him in his arms, and Jesse just goes, I killed her. I loved her more than anything. And I wanted to have this talk with you. I think it's justified that Jesse can think, okay, I killed her because he got her back on drugs in a sense. She made that decision, but if he didn't have to smoke crystal in front of her, but Walter is sitting there knowing that he could have saved her as well. So it's really this interesting parallel between the two of them, where they both have a sense of, we both kind of killed her.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel watching it again, I feel a lot of the motivation on why Walter's helping Jesse at this point in the show is guilt. From guilt.
Yeah.
And he's just like, well, I have to help Jesse in every way I can, because you know, I'm the, I could have saved her. I could have, and we're not looking into the future thinking, well, they could have just shot up again and the same thing could have happened. But
No.
at that time, in that moment, Walter definitely feels like he owes Jesse, something more than just letting him rot in this place. And, I think he would have probably saved him regardless.
Mhm.
I'd like to hope so anyways, but
Yeah.
with Walter, you never really know. But I feel, yeah, a lot of the motivation behind saving Jesse at this point is yeah, from guilt. And that is interesting. Jesse obviously feels a great burden, and he's kind of sitting there and it's in one of his lowest forms. And yeah, he's just like, I'm the one who did it. It's my fault. And they just share this embrace for quite a while.
Yeah. So after this, they do check. They don't say it, but I think they put Jesse into rehab. It's
Hmm.
it's like a spa like facility, but it looks like a rehab facility to me. It's
Hmm.
very, they're wearing robes and it's very like Zen. And
Yeah, perfect word.
so yeah, so they put him in a rehab facility, and that's kind of the last we see of Jesse this season, as Walter just tells him, Saul's holding your money. When you're healthy, it'll be there for you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
And we still see Jesse kind of, he's like, I deserve this. Like,
mhm,
I didn't go back and see this, but there was a point where, Walter tells Jesse in one of the times that they were cooking meth in the desert, he says, he must have told him that, bad things were going to happen or something like that, because
mhm.
Jesse's like, well, you told me, and I deserve this. I deserve this pain, and I deserve this suffering for the bad things I've done.
Yeah, another yeah. Jesse's been through enough so far in these first couple of seasons. He's been through a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Um, so through all this, Walter's being good for once, and he is now at the hospital prepping for surgery. He's gonna have the big surgery to see if it can kind of give him more time with cancer, prolong his life for a period of time. And he's lying in his hospital bed, and he's talking to Flynn. He's talking to Skylar, and he gets the needle to kind of basically true serum. If you've ever taken morphine, you'll be honest. You'll say some crazy stuff. You're really relaxed. And she takes his glasses for a safety hazard. And she goes, "Where's your phone?" And he goes, "Which one?" And death blow to old Walter White.
His face or her face is just, it's just a pure disgust. And clearly Flynn doesn't catch on because she doesn't,
No.
he doesn't know anything about a second cell phone from the first rounds of arguments they've had. So he's just kind of obliviated for it. But yeah, she's clearly upset, and it really gives us a detailed look. It's like a Grey's Anatomy fucking episode where it really shows them all the preparation and everything
Yeah.
going on with the doctors, and how this surgery is going to go, where he's even going to be cut in, and everything that goes on, past that point of after he gets his morphine into him.
Yeah. They showed the lung being out for a period of time, which was disgusting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hate that crap. Almost I hate as much as I hate seeing limbs, cut off. But they go through that, and it's kind of like a fast forward to 3 to 4 weeks later, because they're meeting after the surgery. We see Walter. He looks pretty good. We learned that surgery was a success, that he's hasn't been back to work or anything, but Skylar's kind of been babying him through this. But she kind of asked, you know, can he go back to work? Can he start caring for himself? And the doctor basically says, yeah, like any time, maybe take an extra week off work, but you can go back to work yourself, Skylar, if you want, or do stuff with the baby and go get groceries, what have you. Walter will be fine by himself at home. And when they get home is when we finally see the fallout, which is about a month after the surgery, into the second cell phone comment from Walter.
Yeah, yeah. It's clearly been a while since that's they've met again after the surgery. Walter, to his credit, it's good. He's not that fatigued. He seems all right. Seems in good spirits, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
But you could tell that Skylar's off, and she's not even looking at Walt.
No.
He goes to put his hand on her hand. She doesn't even like kind of give him a reaction to it. and she drops the bomb. She says, I'm taking the baby, I'm going to stay at Hank and Marie's for the weekend. Marie's going to pick up Walter Jr. You have the weekend to gather your things and leave the house, and I want you gone by Monday.
Yeah, and Walter's shocked. He goes, "But why?" And she goes, "Because you're a liar, Walter. You've been lying to me forever." And she goes, "Started with the second cell phone. You finally told the truth when you're on drugs. And I don't know how much else you've been lying to me about, but basically everything you say to me, I think is a lie because there's so much bullshit." And he kind of goes into panic Walter mode where he's like, "What are you talking about? Like, this is crazy." And she basically just grabs her stuff and starts heading for the door. And he kind of has to panic a little bit.
Yeah. And this is where, she pulls out all the stops, let's be honest.
Yeah.
She goes off on him, basically says, I know about the second cell phone. You fessed up when you were on morphine. He's like, I know that, and I thought maybe you're having an affair with Gretchen for the longest time. So I called her, and instead of, and she told me the truth about not donating any of the money. So I have no idea how you got the money whatsoever. And she said, finally, I called your mother, and your mother didn't know you had cancer and didn't see you at all that weekend I drove you to the airport.
Right. You were gone 4 days. I have no idea what you did in those 4 days, but you weren't with your mother. Like you said, you weren't getting money from Gretchen. And he has no more backbone anymore because his excuse every time was, "Oh, you think I'm having an affair?" And she goes, "Well, no, I know you're not having an affair now, but it's even a bigger lie because it could be anything." So he's kind of speechless because everything's out on the table. Every basically big lie he's told her, she knows, and he can't deny it. She goes, "Please give me the respect of not saying that it's not true." And she heads out with the baby to the car, and he goes, "Skylar, please don't leave. Like, let's talk about this." And he goes, "If I tell you the whole truth, will you stay?" And she responds with, "You know what, Walter? I'm kind of scared to know it." And she shuts the door and drives away.
An ultimate low point, but it's been 2 seasons of lies essentially for Walter that's added up, and the goose has laid its egg, and the truth is out. I guess the truth isn't even out, but the fact that every little lie has finally kind of came to the light doesn't look good, and this is an ultimate low point. And at this point, we're kind of approaching the end of the show. But we see a scene where Donald is returning to work, and he's back. He's an air traffic controller.
Yeah,
And he's back and doing his job. He has a kind of a short conversation with a coworker, with basically saying that it's very awkward, not very genuine by his coworker.
no,
Basically saying, we were really thinking about you. Oh, it's so awful what happened to you. And he was like, "Yeah, well, the time off didn't do me any good, and I'm just ready to get back to work."
yeah. And he goes back, and as you all know, I mean, air traffic controller is such it's such a stressful job. I mean, you have planes going in all different directions. You got to direct them safely, and you got to be in a good frame of mind. But he's coming back to work, and he's clearly not ready. Because in one of his calls, he says the word Jane, and it triggers him a little bit because he starts to spiral. He's not giving the correct indicators of where planes are supposed to go. And we see on the screen, 2 planes are headed directly for one another. And he's so in his brain, I don't even think he really realizes what's going on, Shay, because he's just like, whatever. He's just saying words. And Walter's sitting outside of his house thinking, "Okay, my marriage is over. What the hell am I going to do?" And we just hear this bang. And 2 planes, because of Donald's bad directions, have collided obviously a massive explosion, and we just see the bear hit the pool, and debris just starts, falling down near the White Home and in their little cul-de-sac.
Yeah. Yeah, and for back reference, this bear that you referenced, it's basically this pink teddy bear that was there since the first flashback that we see.
Mhm.
So basically, what we know now is that the dead bodies are not, they're not anyone in particular. They're just citizens from this accident,
Yeah.
and this debris in this war zone it turns out it's kind of the result of Donald being incapable of doing his job. Which, when you think about it, Juggy, kind of directly relates back to Walter not saving Jane, in a
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. Jane's alive. He doesn't do this. He doesn't,
Mhm.
he's not in this situation. And oddly enough, from the show as well, Shay, this happened in real life. This happened in Texas around about a year before they shot this for Breaking Bad, and they decided to run it in the show, which is a ballsy move by Vince Gilligan and crew, because obviously that killed a lot of people, passed away in that, and it's also can be looked at as a little insensitive to some people, I guess.
Yeah, you could say it's almost too recent to pull something like that out, whether if it was like 10, 15, 10 years before that. Well, yeah, I mean, that's fine, but yeah, you're right. It is kind of a little insensitive in that matter, but you know, who knows who was going through the air traffic controller's mind
Mhm.
that day. So
Yeah.
it just kind of puts in the back. For me, obviously, I'm not from there, and didn't affect me whatsoever. But for someone who did watch this, I could see them getting a little upset and saying, what the
Mhm.
hell, like, I lost someone in that crash. You know what I mean? Like, well,
Mhm.
how could they just put this into a show?
Right. Yeah, it's certainly interesting. And the season basically ends with debris falling, and we don't see all the bodies fall near Walter's car or anything, but you put two and two together, that's what happens here, like you said. And obviously, Jane passing in the second to last episode, Jane's father indirectly or directly killing many people in this crash. It bad turn of events for this family.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and I mean, not it's you got to think that there should have been some psychological,
Yeah.
assessment before he goes back to work and does something like that, because you need such focus and concentration. But yeah, I mean, it's just unbelievable, and it's an I wouldn't say it's a nice way, but it's a way of tying in everything that we've kind of seen from these flashbacks in the beginning of each other episode, we'll say. So it's good. I mean, great great couple ending
Yeah.
episodes for a season, and any show, I would say, because of the feeling of reward from them getting paid finally, the death of Jane,
Yeah.
and the truth coming out from Skylar finally, that she the basically the gig's up. So it's kind of like, after watching this episode, it's kind of like, well, what do they go from here?
Right.
How does Walter and co kind of, how does
React.
he lie his way through this one, or tape this one up?
Yeah. So now, like you said, we head into season 3, which will start next week. With how does Walter? Is Walter going to move out? Is he going to tell Skylar the truth? In turn, is she going to tell Hank? After he tells her whatever he's doing. What's Jesse's fate now that he's in rehab? What's Gus going to do in all of this? So there's a lot of interesting things heading into season 3, and we'll start it all next week. But yeah, this season was great, and season 3's no slouch either, with a lot of interesting storylines. So but a great end to season 2.
Yeah, absolutely. We get to see more of characters like Saul and this wily vet that we've met in the very last episode. More of Gustavo, and of course more of our some of our favorites, and Walt and Jesse.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So we'll start season 3 next week. Any other shows or movies you've watched lately, Shay, that you want to touch on?
I started watching. Me and my girlfriend started watching Blind Spot, which was on Netflix. Kind of very,
Okay.
it's an interesting show. It's long. It's almost like 22 episodes long. It's good. It's got a good start to it. Okay, we'll see how the plot does, but it could be interesting. Could be good. And I was telling you last week, I bought a couple new James Bond movies, so just kind of running those back. But no, as you know, got to get my hockey. And I told you before the episode started. I stayed out till 12. It was tough one for me, to watch the whole thing. But I said, Montreal's gonna lose. I gotta watch them lose, and they were able to pull it out. So that
Yeah.
that was a highly entertaining game. Went back and forth, and best game to me, it was the best game of the finals so far. So hopefully we get a little bit more of that in Tampa Bay. But other than that, probably tune into to the NBA finals as well. I know Casey, our good friend Casey Ward, loves that, so he'll be watching all series long.
Yeah, no, you told me you watched 44 seconds of a game last week, so that was a big step for him. So
congrats.
Yeah, yeah, no, great game last night. Interesting final tonight between Milwaukee, Phoenix, and the NBA. Who would have predicted that at the beginning of the season? I like it because it's different. These teams, you can say injuries, whatever. Well, team shouldn't have got injured. Be in better shape. Be Anthony Davis and James Harden, maybe be in better shape. You wouldn't be complaining about injuries at this point of the year.
Fair.
But good to see the Unicorn have a big game last night for the Montreal Canadiens. No surprise here. No, game 5 should be interesting. Obviously, that's what the Tampa mayor wanted. She wants to end the series on home ice. So we'll see if Nikita Kucherov and Co can find some ice out there, because there wasn't much last night. Montreal played a great defensive game, and they ultimately held on to win. But yeah, a lot of sports on the docket, like you said. We'll be back next week as always. And as for everybody out there, enjoy the weather while we can, because like Shay said at the beginning, it's New Brunswick, could be snowing next week. So enjoy the NBA finals, enjoy the Stanley Cup final as well. We'll be back next Tuesday. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk soon.